This episode of On the Move is brought to you by the National Center for Healthy Veterans. NCHV provides a holistic, faith based 9-month residential program for veterans at Valor Farms in Alta Vista, Virginia. Their mission is to return healthy veterans to America. They do this by addressing mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and relational wounds. Guys, I can't say enough good things about this program. For any of you guys who have listened to our past episode with Jake Corwin, he's heavily involved at the program at Valor Farms. They have done a lot of good for a lot of people and they just continue to grow. It's a really cool deal. And anyone looking to help out or give back to people and veterans that have done so much for us, this is a great organization and I encourage you to look them up. If you want to help or get involved, you can find out more about their program at www.healthyveterans.org. Now, here's the show. All right, everybody. Welcome to On the Move. I am your host, Joe McDonald, and I'm here with our guest today, Jason Irwin from Ontario, Canada. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. Jason is from what I know anyway, we're going to find out a lot more today, but from what I gather, he's a colt starter, horsemanship clinician, and he is slated to be in the wild card competition for Road to the Horse 2026. So, um, I guess let's get started. I kind of know of you, like I said, through mutual friends of you doing clinics up there in Canada. Like when you go to introduce yourself to somebody, is that kind of what you say is like, oh, I'm a clinician, a horse trainer? What do you say?
Actually, my wife and I kind of have a running joke about that because it's like, what do you do? And we always kind of stand there, not sure what to say because we do a lot of different things here. So, like you mentioned, I start a lot of colts and I do a lot of clinics. Now, my wife and I, we have a TV show called The Horse Trainers as well, and then we travel to a lot of different horse expos throughout Canada and the U.S. and put on training demonstrations. And then my family and I were also in the horse business. We raise quite a few horses and have a pretty decent sized breeding program as well. So obviously, we sell horses from the program, and I mean, we just cover a lot of different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing I've gathered and from personal experience and just doing this show, um, if you're if you're going to be in the horse business, at least in the beginning, you've got to be willing to kind of be a jack of all trades and have some different streams of income. Um, it seems like down the line, if you can specialize in, say a discipline or one sort of way to make money, it helps. But in the beginning, you got to be willing to teach lessons, start colts, trim horses, do whatever. And you kind of have a lot of fires burning at the same time in the beginning anyway.
Yeah, actually, our list of things that we do is the condensed list. We used to do a lot more than that, so we've kind of chopped it down to that part. I do. I guess the one area where I've cut back some is I don't take in as many outside horses as I used to, just because I am on the road quite a bit with the clinics, and as we have more horses of our own that we're training and working with all the time, there's kind of only so many hours in the day. So that was one area we dropped back a little bit, but then as we go along, we're always finding new things we kind of want to do. So we tend to also run down a lot of side roads as we go along. So, I mean, in theory, we should condense down to maybe two things or three, but in reality, that probably isn't going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Well, uh, I think it might just be entrepreneurs in general, but it definitely you see it in the horse industry because most people who are professionals in the horse industry are an entrepreneur on some level. But I know speaking personally, my wife and I, as soon as we dial something back, one of us gets an eye for what we want to do next, right? It's like it's impossible to just leave part of the plate empty for too long.
hmm No, for sure. We're always sort of looking for the next thing and the next, just just kind of the next challenge, the next goal too. So if you're
Mhm.
wired that way, there's sort of what makes sense, and then there's also the part where it's just what do you want to do.
Sure, sure. So, um, talking of mentioned your family has a breeding program. Did you grow up in Ontario?
I was actually born on the East Coast in Canada, on the smallest province, actually, Prince Edward Island, and we were there till I was probably about 12 years old. And my parents actually they farmed, and then they had a tack and western wear business that was a pretty good sized. And
Yeah.
then they sold and then moved to Ontario. So I was 12, so obviously I was going to go along. And then we were here, and then this is kind of where we've stayed. So we run all over the place, but this is home base.
Okay, gotcha. What kind of farming were you doing on the East Coast?
Well, my parents, when I was really little, had dairy and beef. And then they sold the dairy. The tack shop they had was getting bigger and bigger, and they were just spread a little too thin. So they sold the dairy and had the beef in the tack shop and then some horses. And then in Ontario here, we had the horses and the cattle. And then when I was, oh, I guess in college, halfway through, there was a few cases of BSE, which is mad cow disease in Canada. So,
Mhm.
anyways, the border for Canadian beef got slammed to most of the major countries that beef was being shipped to from here. So, anyways, the cattle market crashed, and then we were busier with the horses than what we were with the cattle. The cattle were more or less in the way and taking up space, and we were pretty busy on that end of it. So it just kind of got to a point where it made more sense to go strictly horses than what it did the cattle, and that really suited me. I always kind of thought horses were what I thought it was the main thing I wanted to do, but I kind of thought I was going to have to work in a little bit with something else, and I was always way more interested in the horse end of it anyway. So we ended up
Mhm.
all swinging right over and going that way.
Yeah. So, what kind of horses are these? Are these you're breeding AQHA horses or,
Yeah, yeah,
what like,
everything.
how were the horses making money? I guess is my question.
Well, at the time, we were doing, like we had more like a foundation type quarter horse,
Mhm.
and we were going along, and they were sort of going for mostly just kind of day to day stuff. So somebody that wanted a horse to do a little bit of everything with. So that was sort of our main customer base. And then, but then we didn't have enough of them to really keep everything going to be strictly horses right off the bat. So then what was happening was my dad and me, we would run to mostly the southern and the western USA, and we would buy groups of horses and then bring them home. And then my mom and my younger brother were kind of here keeping everything running at home. And then we would bring them in, and then I would add quite a bit of training to them, and then we would turn them and then run off and go get another group. And we did that for quite a few years as well.
Okay. So basically, like, at scale, kinda some project horses, right?
I would say we were kind of specializing in the high end. So like I would say
Oh,
we
great.
were sort of like I don't know what you would call it, but like kind of a Cadillac all-purpose horse. So something that was really fancy that had a really nice handle on it and kind of a showpiece
Mhm.
type horse. And
Okay.
then we were going along like that for quite a while. And then our own breeding program was growing all the time, kind of in the background. And then eventually it got up to a point where it was big enough that we really didn't have time or room to go run around and get any more. So then we just pretty much flipped over to being a full-time breeder as far as that end of things.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, you were born, like, full throttle into the horse deal then, like, if that was
Well,
growing up,
w
huh?
well, what happened was actually, like I say, my parents had the cattle and the horses, and the horses kept growing in importance as we went along, and, like, I starting colts. I always say I started my first one when I was 12, which I'm pretty sure is correct, and that so I was always starting ours really from that point forward, and then,
Mhm.
and again, that's kinda what I wanted to do mostly. And then, as we went along there, then again, the horses became the full-time deal. So it's like, I wasn't really pushed into it as what I wanted to do anyways, so it really suited me that that's kind of the route we took.
Yeah. Yeah, the stars aligned. So, that's cool that you had that much direction at that young of an age?
Well, I sometimes, like in hindsight, when I was going along, like my parents, they were good livestock people, but neither one of them were really horse trainers. And then there really weren't any horse trainers in the family. So I was going along starting our colts, and most of it was just kind of coming from the outside information that other people would go with. So like a lot of videos, a lot of books, a lot of different training material. But the difference was we just had so many horses that where somebody else would get an idea and go play around with their one horse, I would get an idea and I could go play around with 10 or a dozen that day and experiment with a particular method and see if I liked it or not. And we were going
Mhm.
along, and I always kind of say that was the time period in my life that influenced my training the most. And not that it's easier or harder, but the difference between training for yourself versus training for the public is when you own the horse, you can't send it home if you don't get along with it because you are their home. And so it's kind of puts you in a spot where you have to find a way to train every single horse that you come into contact with. And I think that there was a really, really big influence on me. So we had all different types, and I was training so many different styles of horse in the run of a day. And yeah, I think that was really the thing. And then later on, that helped me a lot in the clinic deal because during the training, it would have been really nice sometimes to have somebody that was sort of looking over your shoulder, keeping you out of trouble. But at the same time, then later on, as a clinician, I think I'm more effective than if I had somebody looking over my shoulder because now somebody will be doing something and I can say, yeah, I've tried that. It's a really, really bad idea because I've just gone down so many dead ends and had to backtrack and kind of made every mistake under the sun. So it's like if somebody said to me, I want to be a horse trainer, I would probably say not to do exactly what I did because I think the path could have been a little bit smoother. But from a clinician point of view, it was almost the perfect background.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna mention that when you said you had the 10 to dozen horses to go try it on. I feel like when someone gets the itch, right? When they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna start horses or even just train my own horse or something like that." Like, especially nowadays, the information's out there, right? Might have been a little bit different back then, but even then, it's like there's magazines, DVDs, all the stuff. Like the information's there. It's the opportunity to have the volume that I feel like hold a lot of people back, right? Because it's tough to do. Not a lot of people have just like a trailer load of horses that's like, okay, well, I got to make these better, and there's not really another option, right?
Hmm.
So that's really cool that you had that opportunity because I tell people, and I ranch rope too, and I think ranch roping is even more so than like horsemanship and colt starting. Like you gotta get some instruction, right? You gotta get some idea, and then you just have to go apply it over and over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And like I use the example of ranch roping because in theory, you could if someone like could just do everything you told them to do, you could really teach them to rope in like an afternoon. Like it's not a long textbook of like how to rope, but it just takes forever to get really proficient and good at it, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And horses are a lot the same way. Like you can you can buy the $30 book, right? And like read the whole thing and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to train a horse. And then it's just over and over and over again, seeing and feeling and being in all the scenarios.
Hmm. Well, like I remember one day I was sitting there, and there was nothing special about this one day, but it was just the time I remember. And I was adding up how many horses we had here that I should be, in theory, riding in a day. And it was how many colts we needed to start and how many older horses that we had here that I was to be working with. And I think the number was 37, and which is like, I can't get on 37 head in one day, and neither can anybody else. But that was how many were waiting for me to kind of
Yeah.
move through. And so it's like, but that to get to your point there about the access to information, I think now there is so much more access to information, but it's could borderline be said that there's almost too much. And that
Mhm.
because now I find a lot of people are running down 20 different paths at the same time and they're not really getting anywhere. So I find a lot of times with the clinics, when I first started doing clinics, I would maybe show a particular technique, and that was maybe the first time that person had ever seen that technique or heard of it or whatever. Whereas nowadays, I find more often when I go to show somebody something, they do sort of have the idea what the technique is or where I'm going to go with this. But what I find is they're a little bit lost within the technique or within the maneuver. So they kind of have the general idea, but they haven't really figured out how to put it together yet. And that was one thing I found with me when I was putting my training program together. Not to knock on anybody, but with a lot of the clinicians, I found sometimes it was like, here's 557 steps to get a halter on your horse. And it's like, well, realistically, we have to kind of streamline this a little bit and
Sure.
get more to the heart of things. So my program was more, it wasn't, um, it was kind of direct. Like I needed to get a reasonable amount of things done in a reasonable length of time, like not pushing on one, but I did need to be moving forward. And I found when I started taking that program and then applying it to the clinic world, it worked pretty darn good because I had sort of moved away some of the stuff that maybe wasn't as important or maybe wasn't quite as necessary and maybe streamlined it a little bit.
Mm, hmm. So let's get into that because I think that's a really interesting topic. So, firstly, when you're starting out, like put me in 12-year-old Jason's shoes. You're like, okay, like why do you want to start that first colt? Like, had you seen someone start a colt, or
Well,
did you just want
actually,
to ride and like
yeah,
starting it was where you had to get through to be able to ride it? Or like where did that come from?
I don't really know. It was just something I was always drawn to. I was really, really interested in it. Like, just to give you an example, not that this is cold starting, but it's like I really used to love studying pedigrees as a little kid. So it's like from the moment I could read, that was one thing I used to do a lot. So it's like I'd be like 8 years old reading pedigrees, and I'd cover them and then try and recite them back and see if I could memorize exactly what each one was. And so it was like that was just always kind of a road that I wanted to go down. So I was always kind of a sponge for information. Now, I had a young horse when I was pretty young. Well, I guess the 12 thing. And then there was a guy that lived not too far from us. And then in theory, he was going to show us how to start. Excuse me. I should say I had one and my younger brother had one. And then the idea was he was going to show us how to start these. And
Mm.
really all we did was kind of get on and turn left and right and that. So I don't know that I really picked up a whole lot from it. But what happened there was it kind of convinced my parents that they thought I kind of knew what I was doing when that probably wasn't exactly true. And but it was enough that they kind of felt free to turn me loose on some
Mhm.
of on the ones that we had. And from there, really, I was just studying it all the time and going forward. So I don't know that I have a reason why I trained my first couple, other than it was just something I was always kind of drawn to. And I remember my dad had a round pen built there, and he said something about, well, this will make it easier for you to start the Colts in. And it's like, I didn't even realize that was in the cards at the time. And but anyways, it sounded like a pretty good idea. So away I went with it. So it was just, but at the end of the day, though, it's not something that I was forced to do by any stretch of the imagination, because I think anybody that was kind of shoved into it would not have stuck with it as long as I
Sure.
have. And I think if you're going to go at something like it's your life's goal or your obsession or whatever you want to call it, that has to be your idea. That isn't anybody else's idea.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It doesn't sound like you were forced by any means.
No,
Uh,
no.
so when you're, like, young and you're learning, where's the information coming from then? Do you like, I remember I bought, like a training, uh, box set, and I kinda, like, went down the line of, like, "Okay, now I'm gonna watch all this guy's stuff. Okay, now I'm gonna watch all this guy's stuff," and,
Mhm.
like, I was just, like, wearing the DVD player out, right? When
Mhm.
I first got exposed to that. So, is that like how what was your process? Where are you getting more information from?
Well, I had a whole bunch of I probably did something pretty close to what you did. Like I had a whole bunch of videos, whole bunch of books. I was just going through it all the time. And but I would say like today, my program doesn't really follow along with really any one person. So I sort of took a little bit
Sure.
from here and there and kind of pieced it together and then kept changing it. So it's like some of the original ones that I would have watched, if you watched me today work with one, I don't think it would look like the same idea anymore. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of changed a lot over time. I think in the beginning, when somebody starts out, whether they're trying to follow along with somebody else in person or through some other means, I think a lot of times in the beginning, they're just trying to copy somebody else, but that's sort of limiting. And then once you do it enough, then you start to get your own feel for it. And then you kind of start to tweak it to suit you. And then over time, it just kind of becomes your own.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the analogy I use is I'm not a musician, but I do understand that, like, if you're gonna learn to play guitar, you've gotta learn your chords and your scales, right? Normally, I'm maybe someone who's can play guitar would correct me on that, but there's a foundation you have to lay, right?
Mhm.
Where, like, you gotta learn to play the scales and do all this, and then once you know the rules, you understand how to break the rules, right?
Mhm.
And and that's I mean, that's definitely how I learned. Like, I learned one program and focused on that, and I was because to your previous point, if you just like, in the very beginning, it's really easy to get lost if you don't really try to copy that person, right?
Mhm.
Now eventually you gotta be able to, like, pick your head up and look around and say, okay, well, now I can pull from that, or maybe I need to change this for me because I'm different than that guy that I've been copying. But in the beginning, to have some techniques that you can kind of have as your cornerstone and lean on, I think can be really valuable for someone before you go into the phase that you were just talking about, where now it's got to fit Joe or it's got to fit Jason, right?
Mhm. Well, I think one thing too, and I remember I was talking to another clinician about this one time, and he made the point, and this is, I don't, won't say the mistake I made, but it does kind of tie in with this, that he said a lot of people would come to him and they want to take a little bit from him and a little bit from somebody else, a little bit from somebody else, and kind of piece it together. And he said that's what he did too, but he said that's the really long road and that's the hard road. And I kind of grinned because that was exactly what I did too. So we were kind of on the same page with that one. But now when I'm talking to somebody that just wants to learn horsemanship and horse training, I do make the point that it's actually a lot easier to get behind a program, go along with it for a while until you're fairly handy, and then start drawing from outside information from there, because at least you have a bit of a base to fall back on. Where if you're just
Mhm.
taking a little bit here and there and then throwing it all together, sometimes it just turns into a little bit of a mess. Like I remember one particular person I knew, and she wasn't a student of ours, but I would just bump into her here and there. And every time I would cross paths with her, she would be like, "Oh, I'm trying this such and such style of training." And the next time I would see her, she's doing something different. The next time she's doing something different. The next time she's doing something different. And then I remember bumping into her one day, and she was saying how much her horse was absolutely blown up. But I was thinking afterwards, like, I didn't really want to say it, but it's like, well, of course it's blowing up. Every day you walk in the barn, you come in with a totally different program. This horse has no idea what the right answer is at any point. So it's just kind of in a constant state of frustration. So I think again, it's great to draw from several places, but it's like if a person's listening to this and wants to progress in their horsemanship, I do think it is better to kind of go along with somebody that you have a little bit of faith in and have some confidence in, build up a bit of a horsemanship base, and then from there go ahead and branch out.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And that's and there's multiple ways to like I know people who have come from different horsemanship programs that I not like either live around me or like trainers around me. Like there's a lot of things like they do differently than me, but then we end up in like we go show together and we're like we still compare notes, right? Because it's like at the end of the day, everybody wants like a broke horse with a nice handle and isn't that's confident and like all the things, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I agree with you on that advice because I've seen the same thing where you can sometimes you kind of just get a flavor of the month and it's like you never really spend enough time anywhere to advance, and you go you go from step 0 to 1 in a lot of different places, but you never get to like 10, which will take you to a lot more places, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, compare that sometimes to if somebody wanted to learn to speak, somebody that spoke English wanted to learn how to speak Spanish, that would be great. But if you learn some Spanish on Monday and French on Tuesday and German on Thursday, and then try to
yeah,
go ahead with all three, you're going to have some problems. So it's like kind of
yeah.
get behind one and stick with it. But I mean, like I've changed and adapted our program quite a bit over time. Like one example that really stands out to me is one time I broke my hand and I was finding it hard to start colts. I could ride one-handed, but I mean, I couldn't really gracefully get on and put the first couple rides on. So anyways, we had a whole bunch of young ones that I was planning to start, and I had been playing around a little bit with the Liberty work and Liberty training up to that point, but I wouldn't say I was very handy with it yet. And because I couldn't be very effective as a rider, I just took the next month and did absolutely nothing but try to figure out a start to put together my Liberty program. And I did that with a lot of horses and again, a solid month. And at the end of that month, I was pretty handy with it. I've changed it. That's several years ago, and I've adapted it a lot more since then and refined it out. But anyways, once I got fairly decent at the Liberty end of things, when I went back and was doing the cold starting, I noticed my cold starting was a whole lot smoother because I was a lot better at reading little subtle suggestions or kind of looking at a horse and knowing what he was probably going to do next and just being aware of
Mhm.
little signals he was giving me. So it's like if you said to somebody that wanted to start colts, you should learn Liberty, they're maybe going to think, well, that's not very necessary. And it's maybe not 100% necessary, but it's just one more thing that once you know it and you add into your program, it's like it's just another step forward.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That I think that's a great example. Because I would totally agree with that. There's a lot you can learn. Um, so I have no great desire to like be a Liberty trainer, right? But
Mhm.
I've messed with it, and actually I was just having this thought today because it's the start of January and we've got some Colts in, and I'm like, I'm not in a huge hurry to get these guys outside because the ground's not very good. So it's like maybe we will spend some extra time in the round pen inside and mess with that. Um,
Mhm.
but you can learn a lot when have you can't micromanage the situation, right? Like if you're handy at the end of the lead rope or sitting on them or whatever, like maybe you'll miss all those subtle things because you're just gonna make it happen over here or make it happen
Mhm.
over here. And
Mhm.
the Liberty, you're literally like, you just have to be who you are, and then the horse is over there not connected to you anyway, and they're just gonna be who they are. And you just kind of have to live with that, no matter how frustrating it is sometimes.
Yeah, I truthfully with the not to go on down this road, but with the Liberty work, actually in the very beginning, it was actually something that I found a little bit frustrating because there would be little things that I knew I was missing. So, like for instance, the horse would disconnect from me, and then it would disconnect again and again and again, and it was sometimes hard to know what the next best thing was. Like, what do you do right now in this little situation? Because some of it is pretty nuanced. Like it's not big changes; it's just little wee changes you make. And then,
Mhm.
but then once I went along with it a little bit more, then it got really interesting because then all of a sudden it kind of opened up another whole world that I didn't really understand up till that point. And again, that's where it kind of came back and helped the rest of my program. And we kind of do some stuff with that too. Like we sometimes have horses that are used in movies or TV shows and film work and stuff like that. So it actually ended up opening the door into that realm too, which comes in very handy, obviously, in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, so all right, back to 12-year-old Jason, and you're starting Colts, and you're, you know, just a sponge at that age, right? Which it's awesome you had that direction because everyone's a sponge at that age, but not a lot of people have like a direction and a desire, like it sounds like you did. So, um, I'm guessing like you you said you went to college. Had you thought about having something besides horses be your profession, or did you always think horses were going to be what you did for a living?
Well, I went to college for agriculture. So it was sort of that lifestyle. But
Mhm.
I think I thought at the time, I was a little bit torn, if I'm being honest here. So at the time, um, I was thinking that I would probably be in agriculture. It'd probably be more like cattle with horses mixed in as maybe, I don't want to say a sideline, but maybe not as 50% of it, or something like that. Like, for instance, I thought I would maybe start colts on the side and then kind of get in the cattle as well. Having said that, though, when I went to agriculture college, it became more and more obvious as I was there that I really wasn't as interested in the other avenues that I could go down with that. So we'd be there learning about crops, and I'd be there reading like a quarter horse news in the class or something like that because I just really didn't care all that much. So it was something that it was definitely the area I was drawn to. And then I had considered going out and trying to become some, maybe like a reining horse trainer, or I was also interested in the thoroughbreds for quite a while, so I was trying to learn a little bit more about that end of the business. So was debating a little bit on the race world, although I never really got much experience with that end of it. I've started colts to be race horses, but I never actually trained any for the track. And then, but yeah, I horses were definitely where it was at. I just kind of assumed, like a lot of people, that it had to tie in with something else. But I mean, it kind of again ended up turning out the way I wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I think a lot of people that end up training horses uh have that they end up training horses but grew up in like an agricultural setting
Hmm.
have that. Like I've met a lot of people. Like I grew up next to Virginia Tech, which is a big land grant university. Um and people they go and they do animal science or something adjacent and they're like, but I want to train horses. And a lot of times somewhere in there it's like, I don't think what I'm learning right now is relevant to me making a living in the horse industry necessarily, right?
Yeah.
um so that that totally makes, so did you end up finishing or
Yeah.
did you?
Yeah. It was
Okay.
actually only a 2-year program. So yeah,
Okay, cool.
I stuck it
Yeah.
out, but I wasn't very far into it before I kind of knew this probably wasn't the route I was going to go down.
Yeah, well that's good. So Uh, so then with all the training and stuff, like once you're I know you kind of have like this image in your mind, but what practically happens once you leave school, right? Are you just like, okay, I've got to think about how to monetize this more? I mean, it sounds like you had a good setup at home already. Um, so were you like, I'm just gonna go back to doing what I did in high school, or did you think about maybe like kind of building the Jason Irwin brand, or not maybe like it is now, but just so people know you're open for business, right?
Mhm. Well, in the beginning, pretty much everything that I rode was something that we owned, like I was mentioning earlier. So I rode a lot of ours, and whether it be ones that we bought or ones that we raised, and I kept going down that road. Now, as I was doing that, quite a few people started asking about clinics, but it was a little bit, I didn't know how serious it was in the very beginning, if I'm being totally honest with you. So, like, somebody would say about a clinic, but sometimes it just seemed like a little bit of a casual question. But then we were going along, and I'm kind of jumping ahead now. But after I got married, my wife and I, some family friends asked us about having a clinic at their place. And I went and taught that one. It was kind of funny in a way because the first clinic I was ever at, I was the clinician. And they ended up having me back again later that fall. So I did 2 clinics that year. And the next year, I'm pretty sure I did 22. So, and then we were going along, and what was happening was a lot of the early barns that I was going to, it would be that 1 or 2 people at the barn had bought one of our horses. And then when they found out we were doing clinics, they would ask if I could go there and kind of teach them and their friends, or them and their fellow boarders, or something like that. And then that's kind of how it got it going. So, like, in a way, the fact that we had sold horses kind of around to so many folks, that really laid a really good groundwork to get the clinic business up and running, because usually a clinician has to start from scratch and get known, where in a way I was kind of already known a little bit before I actually
Mhm.
said, hey, I will do a clinic.
Wow, that's awesome. That's all. So how old were you when you started doing with that first clinic where you had never been
Uh,
to one before?
I'm not sure exactly. Like it wasn't, I didn't start in the clinics real early, if I'm being honest with you. Like I was probably pretty close to 30, if not 30. And
Oh, okay.
so, one thing I found quite a bit, and I mean, everybody has their own experiences. So it's like
Mhm.
just my thought though. I think sometimes people that train a few horses try to become clinicians a little too fast
Mhm.
because they'll be working with a few horses and they get along with them pretty good and they're maybe doing a really good job. But there's a difference between that versus walking to an arena with 12 horses ridden by 12 different people and you maybe don't know any of them and then trying to get them all on the same page and all moving forward within a couple days. And that so like there's a pretty big jump from training one at a time versus trying to sort of train 12 horses or however many it is through 12 people because there's a big difference between teaching the person to teach the horse versus teaching a horse directly. So now one thing again that helped me there a little bit is when we would have folks coming out and looking at horses to buy and stuff like that, I was always kind of like helping them obviously with the horses. So I'm like giving them instruction and helping get along with them and almost doing like little single lessons or little mini clinics in a way to get people out on the right track with their new horse. So in a way, I kind of already had a little bit of experience with that, even though it wasn't technically a clinic. But
Yeah.
yeah, just for anyone that's kind of listening, thinking about it, I definitely wouldn't tell someone don't be a clinician, but I would say don't skip the part where you become pretty decent as a trainer first, because I know sometimes folks they kind of almost want to skip the training part and go right to the clinician part, and it's like, well, that's kind of hard to do. You need a pretty strong base before I think you go
Yeah.
down that road.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree with you there. And I'll be on. So, like for myself, we do, I do like 2 or 3 clinics at our place at, at a year probably. Yeah.
Mhm,
So like maybe a clinic. I think this year we got a schedule where we're going to do like a clinic a quarter. Okay. So I don't consider myself like a clinician,
mhm,
right? Cuz I don't even travel. It's just like at our place locally and a lot of it is like people coming back like people I've already ridden the horses for. Um so I've never met anyone who does clinics at the level you do where you're traveling and it's like one of your main revenue streams who doesn't share that same opinion with you.
mhm,
Because you're right. It's just like, again, it kind of goes back to you have to be exposed to the volume and the repetition, right?
mhm,
Like you have to go in there with 12 different horses and yes, every horse is different, but there are a lot of similarities. So being able to walk into an arena and pick out like, oh, this horse is like this, and I have dealt with a rider like this, and having that skill set, like there's a lot of people who are really handy at training horses right now that couldn't handle that because honestly, in a lot of ways, horse trainer and clinician are 2 different skill sets. Like
mhm.
you've got to be a good trainer to be a good clinician, but um there's definitely people who are good trainers and don't have the communication skills and the I don't want to say problem solving because like it's like they could get on that horse and deal with it, right?
Mhm.
But they don't know how to help the other people through the problem.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And that's something, I think you hit the nail on the head, where being a clinician and being a trainer are two different skill sets. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll hear clinicians banging on the trainers a little bit, but it's like they don't really understand where that person's coming from. But then the trainers sometimes kind of bash on the clinicians a little bit, and they don't understand sometimes that the clinician isn't out there from only the training point of view. The clinician is there from they have to help the person understand so that person can show the horse. So if you have some um, really complicated way of teaching a horse a particular thing, I mean, most horses learn best from the simplest things, the much you can break it down. But if you have some really tricky technique that's probably not going to work really well in a clinic setting, because if you have somebody there and they can't understand it, there's no way they can make their horse understand that. So the clinician really has to have a way of breaking things down so that people can easily wrap their mind around what they're after. And the clinician also
Mhm.
has to have things laid out in a certain way so that the steps kind of just naturally build off one another. So that at the end of those 2 days or 3 days or however long that clinic is, all the things have kind of tied together. So, like, just as an example, I get asked quite a bit to do 1 day long clinics, and I've never really done them, because I sometimes say, like, on day one, it's almost like we open all the cans of worms, and on day two, that's when we close them all. And I don't want to have it where we just find the issues. I need enough time to tie everything together to kind of wrap everything back up again, and kind of help that person pull forward from there. So it's just really something that I think, to be an effective clinician, you sort of have to have a pretty good idea where you're going before things even get started. And I find it kind of funny sometimes, because I'll go to a clinic and there'll be a big cross section of horses, and one person can't get on their horse, another horse is running away, and another horse is screaming and whinnying like crazy for its buddy out in the field. And it looks sometimes a little bit hectic. And somebody that's never
Mhm.
been to one before, they sometimes get a little bit worked up by that. And now I'm kind of at the point, I just kind of like, I'm pretty nonchalant about it, because I know where we're going. I know we're going to get through this within those few days, and I know we're going to be in a good place. So it really doesn't bother me all that much where we're starting from. But it's just something, as you go along and do more of them, I think a person just naturally kind of has just a better feel of it and kind of what to do and when to do it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're, man, teaching in general, you you have to, at least for myself, I have to always make myself just take a breath and remind myself that I cannot move at the speed that I would move if I'm by myself, right?
Mhm,
Which should, anyone listening to this would think that's very obvious, but
mhm.
when you've done it enough times, it's just there's almost like a muscle memory that's in
Yeah.
place, right? Where it's like, okay, he's here. All right, now go do this, right? And so being able to step back from that and dissect that a little bit, um, it takes some patience and takes a lot of discipline too, is what I've found.
Mhm. No, I would 100% agree with that. It's just something, like, as you go along, I think to be a good clinician, you have to be good with horses, but I think you also have to be pretty good with people, obviously, as well. And the one good thing, though, is when a person comes to a clinic, they're not forced to be there. Like, they want to be there and they want to get better and they want to pull ahead. So I think it's really important that when you go to help somebody as a clinician, you really need to keep that in the back of your mind. If it's not going quite the way you want in that moment, you just have to remember that person genuinely wants to be there and they're genuinely doing their best. They maybe haven't quite figured it out, or they maybe haven't quite got their horse to figure it out yet. But they are trying, and they are genuinely trying to do the right thing there. So as long as that's your attitude, I find it actually is pretty easy to help folks.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Um, and what's cool, again, the limited amount I get to teach in that group setting like that, um, I feel like I always end the day feeling like I'm tired, but I'm very fulfilled, right?
Yep.
Because um, even if someone makes just a little bit of or someone maybe even in the time that passed didn't necessarily make, I guess, what you'd call like physical progress, but you're like, oh, they're gonna go home and take it, like they're gonna get this,
Mhm,
right? Because that's kind of how I start all my clinics is like we're here. Don't expect, especially because I do 1 day clinics just because of how our facility's set
mhm,
up. I'm like, do not expect to leave here at the end of the day and all these problems are resolved. Like
mhm,
all I can give you today is like the path I would recommend you take, and then you got to go home and walk down it,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Um,
I
and that I think that can be like sometimes people will go to clinics with maybe not so fair expectations for like the horse and the clinician,
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, I've been to clinics and seen some really cool things happen. Like I've had my like jaw drop, right? When I was like just learning and didn't, I mean, still I'm like not too proud to be impressed when someone's really good with a horse, right? Um, but sometimes I think clinic goers can have unrealistic expectations of what you can get done with a horse in 48 hours, in my opinion.
Mhm. Oh, that definitely comes up. Like that, there are some times where it's just there's certain things that just aren't going to happen. So, like for instance, if a
Mhm.
person wants to work on flying lead changes, but their horse has never loped before, it's like, well, realistically, that's probably not going
Yeah.
to happen in a day or two. But at the same time, what I try to do in a case where maybe a horse isn't going to get quite as far as the person had in mind, what I'll do is get about as far as we can and then spend the last part of the clinic showing them the maybe the next exercises or the next maneuvers to work on so they can go home and just keep going from there. So they don't necessarily check all the boxes in those 2 days, but they kind of have a roadmap for the next month or 2 months or however long it is to build them up to the point they want to be at. And one thing I think that's helping a little bit too is I think there's becoming a little bit more appreciation for horsemanship as we go along, where
Mm.
before, and I don't like to just make it like everything back in the past was bad because it's definitely not. But I think there was a little bit more of an attitude before that this horse is broken, fix it. Where it's like now I think people are a little bit more like, okay, we're having this issue. How do we get on the other side of it or how do we work through it? Or I'd like to teach my horse XYZ, what are the steps I should take? But I do find people are becoming more and more where they're coming in with a kind of the understanding that there's going to be a little process to this. It's not just that we're flipping switches and changing everything in the blink of an eye. It's a program, or there's a bit of a process, or there's just a little bit of a requirement that's sometimes going to go into this. I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you on that. And I think that's been a really good thing.
Mm,
Um, so I want to cover some ground because we skipped ahead, right?
mhm.
Because you were talking about starting clinics, but that leaves out, by my calculations, about a decade of your life. And it you sound like a pretty driven guy. So I can't imagine you spent your 20s just like hanging out, no like I'm sure 20-year-old Jason, like you had a plan and you had some goals, right? So can you talk more about like before the idea of being the clinician kind of came forward, like
Mhm.
it were you focused like on building that horse program? Like that was your main goal professionally?
Yeah, we were going along, and we were really running there on that. It was very all consuming. So in a way, there really wasn't a whole heck of a lot of time to focus on too much else, because really, like as soon as we got down in horses, right away we would add more, and that was just kind of our thing. So we always had so many waiting to work with that I was just kind of running my wheels off, keeping busy with that end of it. Now, as I was going along, it was kind of in the back of my mind that I was going to do clinics, but I don't
Mhm,
know that I
mhm.
really knew how I was going to go about it. It just seemed to me from an outside at that time, an outsider looking in, it seemed like everybody and their dog was offering clinics, and I wasn't exactly sure maybe what my path into that world was. And I don't know why, but it just kind of was in my mind that this was it going to end up being something that I would do. So then I was going, now when I met my wife, and I will have to pop back to that one because actually that played a really big role. But
Oh
when
yeah.
and
Wives
then,
often do.
yeah, well, I would say this one here especially so, but yes, absolutely. But I was going along, and then I started. I like the cold starting a lot, but sometimes to me, in the back of my mind, it seemed like a little bit of an unappreciated skill. So, for instance, if I was out starting a colt, if I found a way to be just a little bit smoother, or maybe move through it, the training just a little bit nicer, or just found a way to kind of help that colt a little bit better, I really got a kick out of that. Like it was just from a personal point of view, I really, really enjoyed that and I enjoyed improving. But it was just one of those things that usually the only person that was ever aware of it was me. So,
Mhm.
and I kind of had the hankering maybe to show a little bit, but I wasn't exactly sure in what. And then I started entering like a couple cold starting competitions, and I really enjoyed those. And they just kind of gave me another goal and another thing to work towards. But I kind of came at it from a little different point of view. So instead of just doing it for the sake of doing it, what was happening was I would maybe enter like maybe a cold starting competition that was part of like a horse expo. And then when I would go to that, then I would get to meet all the folks that actually ran the event or kind of the behind the scenes folks and that. And then that there kind of then opened the door of from moving to the cold starting to doing the clinics at the expos. So that's kind of what got me into those. And then we kind of took that ball and ran with it. And there, so then we started doing more and more expos. And again, that opened up the door again, even more into the clinic world. I was doing clinics before the expos, but then when we were doing all the expos, then that opened us up quite a bit more to get bigger and bigger into the clinic deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and expos are still big, but I mean, to me, especially early social media or even pre-social media, like expos were how you did it, man. Like
Mhm,
expos and RFD TV, right?
mhm,
Were were kind of the two outlets, and I mean they're still there and they're still very viable. Um, you just have also like YouTube, Facebook, all the other stuff
mhm.
to get your name out there. But like it to me, this time period that you're talking about, like if you're really going to do the clinic thing, that's how you let people know you're out there in any capacity, right? Is being at those horse expos.
The expos, I found I really like them. Like I personally really, really enjoy teaching at expos because usually there's so many folks in the stands that I find I get to show what I want to work on or demonstrate what we do to a lot more people. So usually at an expo there will be anywhere from 2 to 6 horses that we'll work with at a time, but then there's maybe a few hundred people in the stands as well, so you get in front of a lot more people, and I just enjoy the
Mhm.
interaction, it's just something I really get a kick out of. So, those are very important. I think you are correct there that, like, people are also getting their information other places, so like YouTube and that type of thing. One thing, though, I have found personally is the expos, how would I word this? You actually have to be able to do what you say you can do. And that's
Yeah.
something that's not always true with stuff that's posted. And so if somebody works with 3 horses and can't get along with 2 of them, but does get along with 1, they can film that and then kind of let on like that's what they can do with all of them. And at an expo, you really get put on the spot. So like there are
Mhm.
times where it's just like, here's this horse. It's had this problem for the last 10 years, and you have 60 minutes to make a difference. And so there are definitely times at those events where it's kind of like somebody walks up and shines the light in your eyes and says, "Do this," and we want to be impressed. And so it's like I don't think the expos are good for people to start presenting at until they feel pretty confident in their own skin and feel pretty confident that they can do um, what they say they can do. The other thing is too, like when we go to an expo, usually we're going a pretty far distance. So there's some that are closer, but the majority of them are quite a ways away. So we're not bringing demonstration horses and we're not bringing students of ours that already know the drill. So like we'll go to an event and there'll be a particular maybe problem solving topic and the horse we're going to work with is a horse that we met 1 minute before it walked into the ring. And so, in a way, we're almost in the high risk, high reward category when it comes to the events because it is taking kind of the hard path, but it's also where when you show folks how to get through, they're really genuinely seeing a change. They're not seeing the horse that's done this 500 times in its home arena first. They're seeing this horse maybe do something for the first time or have a breakthrough for the first time. So there's all kinds of pros and cons to them, but I shouldn't say there's no really cons, but however a person's going to go out there and spread their name and do their thing, there's good and bad to everything. But I do
Yeah.
think the expos are a lot more true to life than maybe what you're just going to see online.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add one more thing to all your points there. And this isn't horse specific. This is advice I hear from people who are successful in any business. Like there is still no substitute for face to face interaction.
No.
Period. Right. So like you're talking about those couple hundred people in the stands. Um, yeah, maybe it's not the same as having like a video go viral, but those people, like they're already at the expo. So they are interested enough, they got in their cars and drove to the expo,
Mm,
right? And then they're still interested enough that they sat down and deliberately like watched and saw what you had to do. And then I imagine, when you're teaching and stuff, they have questions and you answer them and there's like interaction, right? Which is just, there's still no substitute for that, even though there's all these other avenues for getting what you want to present to the public out there. um, that to me is still something that the expos really have going for them, is
big
being in
time.
person.
And another thing too is like when people go to one of those, generally an expo has a few or several clinicians. So people go in generally pretty open minded and they want to see maybe two or three in particular, or they want to see a clinic on a particular topic. So they're going in there pretty open minded and they genuinely are curious. And I think the difference between that versus like maybe watching something on TV or wherever, a lot of times that person has one question that they've been trying to figure out the answer to. Like maybe they're trying to teach their horse one particular thing and it's just not working. And they've watched every video on it, they've read the books on it, they've done all these things. But when they can just walk up to you and say, I have this issue, do you have any advice? I know then to hone in obviously on that exact thing. So I can give them the direct answer to that one problem that they've been maybe
Yeah.
dealing with for the last few weeks or months or years or however long it is. But like, I mean, again, there's pros to everything. Like you mentioned RFD, like my wife and I, like we have a TV show actually of our own, and it plays on RFD TV Canada and the Cowboy Channel Canada, and that. But like that though, the big bonus is it's playing several times a week, so we're reaching all kinds of people that we'll never be able to reach in person, just because I can only be
Mhm.
so many places. And like you say, to go to an expo, a person has to get in their vehicle and actually get there. Where with the show, for instance, it's on when you include the repeats half a dozen times a week. So we're obviously out there getting in front of a lot of people that we wouldn't get a chance to reach otherwise. So again, no matter what you pick, there's definitely strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're a smart guy like you and you just do a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, yeah, hit all the nails.
Yeah, just hit all the nails, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, yeah. So you said you had to circle back to your wife. So mention that. Where does meeting her and getting married like fall into all of this?
Well, it was a bit of a different meeting there. I got a phone call one day, well, not me directly at the farm, and it was my wife Bronwyn, who obviously I didn't know yet, and that, but she was asking about a black filly that we had for sale. So she asked some questions about it, and then I think she maybe phoned back once or twice, and we talked back and forth a little bit. And she lived like 6 7 hours away from here, so she ended up buying the filly over the phone, and then she hired somebody else to pick up the horse. So she sent the trucker pick up the horse, took her home, and she just really loved this mare. She just clicked with her from the moment they kind of first got together, but she didn't have her very long. And then we don't know exactly what it was, either like a bear or a mountain lion ended up killing the mare, and she hadn't had her
Oh,
very
yeah.
long at
Yeah.
all. So anyways, she passed away and she's obviously Bronwyn was really heartbroken. And this is it kind of been her dream horse. Like she was just everything she had kind of wanted and what and that type of thing. And so anyways, um, there's a little bit of a gap in time there. And then her and her sister ended up coming out to the farm one day to see about another filly a little ways down the road. So then I ended up meeting her. So we ended up kind of just messaging back and forth after that, and then kind of stayed in touch and wrote back and forth quite a bit. I think it was email and however else. And then we ended up going out, meeting kind of halfway. Toronto was sort of the halfway mark for the two of us. So, anyways, we kind of started going out, and then I kept selling her horses though while she was my girlfriend. So that was kind of the bonus there. So I think she ended up buying four over the next few years, and she was actually an English rider. So she was just switching, or not just switching, but she had rode English and then she had kind of switched over to barrel racing and pole bending. So then we were going out. Then we ended up getting married. And then we ended up like it's kind of combining, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of taking the strengths from each and kind of adding them into our program and kind of refining it out a little bit more. So that went along like that. And then she's quite a driven person and quite a oriented person as well. So we were always kind of just looking for the next thing to do. So we were always, what can we try now? What can we do next? What's the next goal? What's the next challenge? And it was kind of fun because it's just like when you have somebody else that's brainstorming too and always kind of looking over the next horizon, you come up with some stuff that maybe you wouldn't have come up with on your own. And so then we started going through and doing that. And then, like for instance, the TV show we do together, when we go to a horse expo, generally both of us are clinicians at the event. um, she writes for horse magazines like I do. She just, I mean, she's very, very big part of it. She's as much of much as part of our business as I am. It's a 50-50 thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. I know, like my wife and I are not dissimilar in our story. And we've had to, I don't know, this might be of like a specific problem, but it was very good marriage counseling when we started learning how to like ride behind one another.
Hmm.
It really made us work and on our communication skills and
Yeah.
how to share our thoughts and opinions in diplomatic ways.
Yeah. Oh, there was a little bit of a period there. I'm not going to lie. That probably happened too with us. But I think because she had such a strong English background, she just naturally came at things from a slightly different angle than what
Mhm.
I do. Um, but then again, once I kind of took some of the things, like once I understood more where she was coming from and once she understood more where I was coming from, then it was relatively easy to get on the same page after that. In the very beginning, we were kind of coming at things from opposite angles, but it didn't take that long to kind of work through that part.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in the English world and then switched to the kind of horsemanship Western side of things. But my wife, she's still to this day a hunter jumper trainer. So,
Hmm.
um, bridging that gap. I mean, now we can do it without even thinking about it. But
Hmm.
you're totally right. You just like it's almost like you see a problem and the problem both of you see is just completely unrelated. It seems unrelated to one another, right?
Hmm.
But that's awesome. And man, it sounds like it's the same for you, but I know for me, it's just like it's such a blessing to be able to do what you love, with someone that you love, right?
Hmm.
And like be able to build that together. Because I have a lot of friends who aren't in the horse world and they don't get to do that. And like they still have like great happy marriages, but I see how professionally they're separate and a lot of times that means they end up spending a lot of time apart from each other and things like that. So
Hmm.
that's really cool. So yeah, talk to me. My wife and I we affectionately call it scheming,
Hmm.
right? When you're talking about like what are our next goals, what are our next thing. So now kind of take me to the where where you're starting to do the clinics. I mean, it sounds like you exploded because didn't you say you went from 2 to 22 in a
Yeah.
year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is this at that point, is it all like word of mouth or like when did because in my mind, it's one thing to be like a local or regional clinician, and it's another thing to be doing the expos and and the RFD TV, right? Like that's kind of the next level, right?
Mhm.
So it the clinics are going gangbusters. What was kind of your strategy for we're going to like we're gonna take this and make this a big part of our business?
Mhm. Uh, well, I guess like we just kind of a lot of the clinics were growing because I would maybe teach a clinic and there would be X number of people there. And then one person would maybe be boarding at another barn somewhere else. And they would go home to their barn and then say, we should have one here. And then I would kind of go there. And then somebody would drive to the clinic maybe from a little farther away. And then they would go home and tell their barn they'd like to have one. So a lot of the earlier ones were word of mouth in a way that way. Now, one thing that helped a little bit, our farm already had like a pretty decent following. So when we said we were doing clinics, like we kind of had ways to advertise them because we already had a little bit of a business. I shouldn't say a little bit of a business, but we already had like another business almost to draw folks from.
Yeah.
If that makes
You had a
sense.
network. Yeah.
Yes, that's probably the best word to use. So
Yeah.
we were doing that. Now, actually, being honest, if you have, if you're a local clinician or you're doing it at a big scale, both of those can be good things. I find that the middle ground is actually the terrible ground to be in because, like, for instance, there was a little bit of a period in there where I had to go farther afield, but I maybe wasn't as known farther away. So then it was tricky because you'd book a clinic far away, but then didn't have as big a base to pull from in that area. So then it would be a little trickier to have as many clinics and fill them up farther from home. So it didn't, I guess we went along for a little while and it was almost one of these things where it's like you either want to be small and do a few of them and then do your training or anything else you're going to do, or hit it like you really mean it and really go at it and make things happen.
Mhm.
But I think this is a business that if you're going to kind of half heart around in it and think that it's really going to become something, I don't know how successful that's going to be. Like, there's maybe somebody else that would tell you the exact opposite and would be fully correct. But just for me, anyways, I found it was either like do it like you mean it or don't do it, or just do a couple at home, I should say. And that. So we were going along and it, again, we were kind of thinking, we just really made up our mind that we were going to make this happen. So then it was like, well, what are all the different ways to go about this? So it's like, again, we basically made a great big list, like all horse magazines, like get a TV show, do all the things, like just we didn't really sometimes even care too much how we were going to do it. It was just like come up with the idea and then we'll figure out how to do it afterwards. Once we have
Mhm.
sort of like if we have the end goal in mind, we can figure a path there somewhere or another. And then
Yeah.
a lot of it, like I, not that it was just promotion though, because when I was doing the clinics, like I really came at them from the point of view where I wanted everybody to go home happy and I wanted folks to feel like they really got their money's worth and hopefully more than their money's worth. And so the word of mouth thing was the most important thing. There's just no getting around that point. So, like, a person could have $1 million worth of advertising behind them, but if they're not doing a good job, I think they're not going to really, this isn't maybe for
Mhm.
them. And that, not to be a blowhard, but I mean, I genuinely tried to do as much as we could for folks, everybody that showed up to a clinic. So, but we were doing that, and then we were just coming up with some offshoot ideas too. So, like, just as an example, you know, those reality shows like the America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent
Mhm.
and those types of things. So, my wife there, she put down she wanted to be on Canada's Got Talent. And there was no Canada's Got Talent at that time. Like, it didn't actually exist. There was the American one and there were some other ones, but there was no Canadian one. So then, lo and behold, about 2 years later, Canada's Got Talent, the reality show opens up. And then right away, she sends in a video of a couple of our horses, kind of just doing some tricks and a little bit of a performance, and never heard a word back from them. And then the following year, they opened it up again. And Bronwyn did the exact same thing. And about 5 minutes later, we got a message. We'd like to talk to you about this. So, anyways, we went back and forth, and then we ended up having two of our horses on that show there for a little performance thing too. So it's just like, but just kind of offshoot things like that. They're just always kind of in the back of our mind. And honestly, it made things a lot more interesting and a lot more exciting too, because we're always kind of shooting for something that seems maybe just a little bit out of reach.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the performance for Canada's Got Talent? Was that like were you doing Liberty stuff, or like describe to me what you went on the show and did?
Sort of something like that. So we had two horses. Bronwyn had hers at Liberty, and I just had one that rode with a saddle but had a neck rope on instead of a bridle. And we kind of had them doing like tricks and stuff. So the one would circle around her and then rear up and kind of do a few things. And I had mine lay down on the stage and different things like that. So we kind of put together the performance itself. They're like they did edit it down a little bit, so what we actually did was a lot longer than what actually made TV, and that. But I mean, it was pretty stinking cool and like to do. And so like it was actually on a stage in a casino, so we had to drove underneath into the parking garage with a truck and trailer where all the tour buses are to bring in like singers and all the acts and stuff like this. And it was in
Yeah.
Niagara Falls, so it was kind of funny. There was no direct route up into the building to get to the stage. I shouldn't say no direct route to the building, but there was no big opening to get to the stage. So we ended up having the horses in the parking area, and then they had to swing the doors and take them out on the main street in downtown Niagara Falls, and then take them around the corner, go through a door, load them in a freight elevator, run them up the freight elevator, take them across onto a stage, and all this kind of thing too. So it was like it was very different. It was very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And then what do you do for footing on the stage?
They ended up running out mats, so it looked like livestock matting, although that's actually not what it was, but it was pretty much the same thing.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool, man. That's really cool. I mean, talk about being able to manifest something. Like saying you
Yeah,
want to go on a TV show that doesn't exist, like
yeah.
that's awesome. Good for your I mean, good for both you guys, but that's awesome that your wife is that driven that she can go and say like, "Nope, this is my goal." And then, it just comes into fruition and you're prepared for it when it does.
hmm Yeah, and not to get off on a tangent, but one thing I've said before, I always heard people say when you're setting goals, set realistic goals. And the idea being you could meet them and you set the next one, and then you meet that one, then you set the next one. And then I remember hearing somebody say, the problem with realistic goals is they're boring. So you don't really care that much if you get them or not. And it kind of made me start thinking about things just a little bit differently. And the
Yeah.
idea was come up with the crazy one and then figure out a way to get to it. And don't worry too much in the beginning though how to do it. Just come up with the goal. That's the most important part, and then worry about the how to afterwards. So that's something that I think we've done quite a bit. And really, when you sort of look at a goal as then later on as a problem, and then you just look at it as how do I solve this problem? There's
Mhm.
probably a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked about it on this show before. Um, have you ever read the book Psycho Cybernetics or heard of
I,
the book?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've read that one. I do read a lot of that type of thing, but no, I haven't read that one.
Yeah. So it's worth a read. It's one of those where I've got to like take it in portions, right? If you're on a long drive, because I do a lot of audiobooks because just if you're in the horse industry, a lot of times you have long drives, right? So
Yeah,
I'll do
same here.
like I'll do the audiobook. That one I got like 45 minutes to an hour, and then like my brain will turn to mush because it's like
Mhm,
kind of heavy and you're like thinking the whole time. So I got to switch between that and something a little lighter.
mhm,
But a big part of that book is talks about how even when the front of your brain, like your conscious brain, isn't working on something, uh, the rest of your brain will be, right? So, for example, you're a basketball player and you're taking mental reps of like, I am making a free throw, I am making a free throw, I'm making a free throw,
mhm,
right? That your brain is thinking about like, what do I do with my body to make that happen, right?
Mhm,
Even though you're not getting like the real world feedback. So again, just the idea of like having these goals, and that's why people are big on writing goals down or sharing your goals with other people, is just pronouncing them to the world to where like they're out there and your brain can read on a blackboard or something, you know, be on Canada's Got Talent.
mhm,
Like you're you could like see it and then just go about the rest of your day and never think about it again. But in the back of your brain, like they're already making like it's already making up potential solutions to the problem, right?
mhm,
And that's kind of what you're saying is the goal is the problem. So like having those goals and having them somewhere external, like be out in the world besides just in your own brain, like makes it so that your brain is already working on those goals even if you're not consciously doing it.
mhm.
Um so that's I would recommend reading the book, but that's a big takeaway of the book in my opinion.
I'll definitely I will read that one now that you mentioned that. I think something else too is that if you already have a goal in mind, then when there's a little bit of an opening, a way to maybe
Mhm.
get to it, you're already kind of programmed to see it. Where
Yeah.
if you don't have that goal and all of a sudden here's an opportunity to get you there, you're just going to miss it because you weren't looking in the first place. That whereas like if you're like, here's where I want to be or here's what I want to do, all of a sudden when a little bit of an opportunity opens up, it doesn't have to the door doesn't need to swing wide open. The window just needs to crack a little bit and you will kind of see a way to maybe pull forward a little bit and kind of work towards that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing as, people call it the law of attraction,
Mhm,
right? Where you're just like, you're thinking about something, and then all of a sudden, like, pops up right in front of you. It's like, well,
mhm,
maybe it was going to pop up either way, but exactly the point you just made, now you're like ready for it to pop up, even just like pop up a little bit, right?
mhm,
And then you're mentally ready to take full advantage.
mhm,
So that's cool. I want to shift the conversation a little bit here. Because I mean, I know there's more to your life story, but it seems like that like starting the clinics kind of puts you on that path, right? And it's grown and grown as far as like your brand and the horses, and you're doing more clinics, and now you're going to Road to the Horse. Um, but I would like to visit with you a little bit more. Uh, if someone you sat down and we were just chatting, and someone said, "Jason, describe to me your philosophy with working with horses." Like, what would you tell them? Because I think that's an interesting question, because I have people ask me that question quite a bit.
mhm,
Riding for the public and training horses, they're like, "Well, tell me about your philosophy of training horses." And it's not that it's not something I think about, because I do think. I mean, I think about horses for the majority of my day, pretty much every day.
mhm,
But sometimes I think it can be hard quantifying your philosophy into an elevator pitch. But
mhm.
you're a clinician, so you're probably way better at it than I am.
I get asked that a lot actually, and I don't know that I've perfected the elevator pitch on that one. If I'm being totally honest with you, I would say that I would consider good horsemanship to be when a person understands the way a horse thinks and then presents information to the horse in the way that it's easiest for him to understand it. And that so it's like if you kind of understand the way a horse is wired, then you I don't want to say you I don't know if direct path is the best word, but here's how to get something across the simplest, here's how to get something across the easiest, and then just naturally build up to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I'm always trying to think about how could I present this to the horse that's just a little bit more obvious to him or just a little bit easier for him to understand.
Hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Let's talk about we kind of buried the lead. You're going into Road to the Horse, right?
Mhm,
And the colt starting competition. So let's look at it through like the lens of a colt starting competition. Like you go in there, you have a horse loose in the round pen. Um, what are the things you're thinking about in the beginning? Like what are you trying to help that horse understand so that you can go and ride it and start it and make it a I always use the term like if you're a colt starter, your job's to make a horse a functional member of society,
Mhm,
right? Like, can I tie you up? Can the farrier come work on you? Can the vet come work on you? Can someone get on and ride you around like down to the mailbox or whatever?
mhm.
All that stuff. So like what's kind of the first thing in your mind you're walking into a round pen at a colt starting competition? What are you trying to get out of your horse?
I would say the first part is some interaction. So something I like to do is now it's going to vary a little bit depending on what type of colt is standing there. But a lot of times, um, if I have one that I can get a halter on either right away or relatively quickly, I'll do quite a bit of moving backwards and then drawing the horse to me and then just kind of rubbing and petting on him and then draw back and then bring him to me and rub and pet on him. And the idea behind this is I want to start the whole thing where the answer to every problem is Jason. And so I want the horse
Yeah.
thinking 2 plus 2 equals come to Jason and it'll be good. 300 divided by 13.67. The answer is Jason. And come back and keep kind of have it where they're almost, I don't know if retreating is the word, but coming to me or looking to me to be the answer to their problems. I feel like if they start to look at me as being the safe place and being the place of comfort, then when I kind of present something to them that they're maybe a little bit unsure about. So for instance, I just try to put the saddle pad on for the first time. They're maybe just a little bit tense or maybe just a little bit tight about it. But I kind of want them already thinking about it's okay because I said it was okay. I want them having a little bit of faith in me before I start actually trying to get them to do anything. I find if you go in and just start asking them to do stuff right away, they really don't know you. They have no faith in you and they have no confidence in you. So, in a way, why should they have any faith that what you're showing them is something that's in their best interest?
Yeah. Well, I, I'd like to think I get exactly what you're talking about because that I feel like I've given that spiel to people before,
Mhm,
right? The can we the, especially if you're riding outside horses and maybe a horse that has been like I'll use the example because I think this happens a lot. Like horses that have been shown in like weanling or yearling classes, right? So like a horse that's probably been handled more than average
mhm,
for um for a horse that age. Like those horses maybe I'm not saying they have been mistreated because that's not usually the case, but a lot of times humans come become very benign to them,
mhm.
right? Because they just get handled so much. It's like humans aren't necessarily the problem, but like a lot of things happen and they're just kind of around. It's not that
Yeah.
they're the solution, right?
Yes.
And so like that's probably where I see it the most, as opposed to something that's just been, you know, weaned and then turned out on the back 40 until they're 2 years old, right?
Mhm,
Like, and maybe doesn't get a lot of human interaction besides someone driving by in a feed truck or something.
mhm,
Um, those horses, they're like, they're pretty inclined, especially you get them in like an indoor or something like that. They're pretty inclined to be like, what is going on? Like, who are you? Like, what am I doing here? Like they're
mhm.
kind of have that natural curiosity still. And I find like take to what you're talking about pretty quick. Cause I don't know, definitely like being in the part of the world where I am, I'd say I get more of the former horses where they have been just handled a lot. Um, and sometimes you have to like sometimes they're like really pushy and so it's like a safety thing. Like the first thing I got to do is like get some respect.
Mhm.
But man, if you at all can get it to where like you said they're drawing into you and like kind of switched on about you, it it makes a huge difference.
The type that
Um
you're describing is something I deal with quite a bit. So, like, usually, for instance, like a competition or like I do a lot of cold starting demonstrations as well. And
Mhm.
in those settings, usually I'm dealing more with the type of horse that you described that has run in a fairly good sized group and somebody drove through once a day and fed them. And that's about how much handling they get on a daily basis. So with those ones there, I really want them coming to me and kind of retreating to me, looking to me for their answers. With the other ones that you're describing, which I'm quite familiar with one like that, sometimes I'll come at it a little bit different, kind of depending though on the horse. So if one has sort of this nonchalant, you're there, but I don't really care about you one way or the other attitude, then what I tend to do is I will then start by asking them to do a little something, but I tend to ask them to maybe go just a hair faster or with just a little more effort than whatever they were going to kind of naturally offer me. So, for instance, say I asked one to kind of circle around me. If they sort of meander around, I'm just going to step on the gas pedal a little bit and have them trying just a little bit harder than whatever it was they were naturally going to do, because that way they're fully aware that I'm causing this to happen. It's not that they're just wandering around and I'm in the vicinity. Like, it's happening because I said I wanted it to happen. Then I'll kind of start making some changes. So just it's not going to be very exciting stuff, but for instance, I would maybe have them start to trot around me, maybe yield the hindquarters a little bit quick, trot them the other way, yield them back, do a couple times each way, just quick enough that the horse is going around being a little bit like, whoa, what's going on today? This is a little different. Then I would almost be thinking about then draw them up and then just kind of stand there with them and just spend a minute with them and then kind of go out again. That next time, though, if he's sort of showing signs that he's maybe paying a little more attention or kind of wanting to interact with me a little bit more, then I would maybe go a little slower on the next one. Or if he's not paying attention, then I would go ahead and step it back up and go a little bit quicker again. And but it's if they're not giving me attention, I'm going to ask them to do enough that they are going to give me attention. And but then when that's done, I also want to say, but there's no hard feelings and we're still buddies here. The exception to that would maybe be if one is just very poor manners, just has as soon as they're in the area of a person, they're pushing into them, running them over or something like that. Then with one like that, truthfully, I don't worry too much about having them actually connect to me. I just want to have them doing some things that I want them to do. And I actually tend to, with a horse like that, have them rest a little bit away from me. So I would maybe work them around a little bit and then have them rest 10 feet away from me if I had a line on them, for
Mhm.
example. And that way there, if they were then going to walk into me, to push into me or bump me, I have quite a distance to see them coming. So it's not like they can just take a couple steps forward and be in my space. I have time to see that horse is coming in and maybe going to be a little bit disrespectful. So I can fix it before they actually get a chance to do anything really very wrong. And I find once I've done that enough, then again, as long as I've used good timing and good judgment, the horse is going to start to interact with me a little bit more. Then I can start to go back to my original thought of having them sort of be with me and enjoy being with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's some the last type of horse you talked about, it's almost like they have to learn to like, yes, there's a pushiness, but it's like almost a insecurity. Like you have to learn to exist over there.
Yes.
Right. And so like getting the release to be in the spot where they're most insecure goes a long way if you do it correctly and don't go too far the other way and then they're afraid of people, which I have seen be done and maybe
I,
made that mistake myself.
I found the hardest horses to train are the ones where somebody has let the horse walk all over them and have absolutely no rules. And then if you had a horse like that, that goes from that type of person, then goes to a really rough trainer. And then the rough trainer has been way, way too far the other way. They're just getting on their case all the time. They're being way too quick. They're being just again rough. And and then what happens when you get those two extremes in a horse's life early on, I find the horse, it's kind of the worst of both worlds, because a lot of times they're still pushy, rude, and don't know the rules, but they're also kind of scared of people at the same time. So then when you're trying to
Mhm.
work with them, if you're being very strict, they're scared of you. But then when you're trying to be really relaxed and have them enjoy being with you, then they're the one that goes right back to pushing you all over and then being kind of dangerous. So it's like, I can't think of a worse way to start a horse out in life, to start with that one person and then move on to the other. I think that's a pretty hard start for a horse. And then whoever the third person is that has to deal with the horse, I think they really have their work cut out for them. And I think they're going to walk a fine line for a while until they kind of find that perfect mix to bring that horse back to kind of a level ground.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That I'm chuckling because I know exactly what you're talking about, where I mean, it's tough when they're afraid, and then the number one thing, it's not like a normal horse because most horses, like a default
Mm,
horse, just popped out a mom and hasn't had a lot of human interaction. When they're afraid, they're like, "Get the heck out of Dodge."
mhm,
But those when they're afraid, they're like, "Oh, I guess I'll run over top of this guy again."
mhm,
Oh man, that could be tough situation, and definitely um, working through those makes you a better horseman in the long run because that's kind of like working on hard mode for a little while.
mhm. And I think that's kind of maybe it ties in with something we were talking about earlier. But when you deal with the hard ones, it's not maybe the most fun in the moment, but those are the ones that you do learn the most from. And
Yeah.
it's there's always a little bit of a fine line, I think, in the horse world, because if somebody's working as a trainer, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people like they would like to ride the really the horses that are going to go on to have big performance careers and do big things. That's just kind of naturally the what a lot of people would be drawn to. But a lot of times it is those hard ones that you do pick up the most on, and it's those ones that you have to refine your horsemanship with the most to be able to get through to them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, I I agree with you on that. Um, so lastly, you're an experienced participant in colt starting competitions. So, but you've kind of got the granddaddy of them all, right? Road to the Horse is probably the best known colt starting competition. Is there anything you've been doing to or plan to do to prepare for the competition? Because uh, it is different than just starting a colt at home, right? Like you can kind of you're on your own timeline or whatever imposed timeline you have, but it's generally not as tight
Mhm,
as in a competition setting. And then you also, you're being judged on a rubric, right? And horse trainers are all everyone to varying degrees has kind of their own prioritization of what's important to them when they're starting a horse, right?
mhm,
But now you have a rubric. Part of the rubric is how well you explain things, which you're already a clinician, so that
mhm,
helps. But like, what in general are you doing to prepare for Road to the Horse in 2026?
mhm. Uh, well, probably really the answer is starting more colts. Like I start a lot of them anyways. We have a decent sized group of our own that I'm just kind of getting going on right now. And then I have some others that will be probably getting going on fairly soon before the event. So I'm kind of doing this all the time in a way. So one thing I think that maybe helps me a little bit is that again, I do colt starting demonstrations at like expos and at horse events and things of that nature. So working in that timeline is kind of what I have to do at those events as well. Also, my training style, when do work with a young one, I generally am somebody that tends to get on a little bit sooner than later. So I found with the cold startings, one maybe nice thing for me was that I really didn't have to change a whole heck of a lot to be able to go into them. Now, obviously, at home, no one cares if you stop at an hour or an hour and 15 minutes or at 45 minutes. Like it just doesn't matter. Actually, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. It does matter to the horse. You just try to find the best point. And where obviously in the competition there is set times. So that's obviously different. Um, but having said that, like again, I think I kind of was drawn to the cold startings in a way because they already kind of fit my program before I ever started doing them. So it really wasn't that big a difference. Maybe one difference though would be at home obstacles are really not a factor in the first few days. So
Mhm.
getting them to cross logs or a bridge, or I'm not exactly sure yet what the things are going to be. But that's just something that really would not be all that important at home. At home, it would be more about just getting on and getting to move around and then start to guide around. carrying me and be happy and relaxed about the whole deal. So factoring in the obstacles is obviously a little bit of a thing. Now, having said all that, I just got sent the exact format and rules here today. So I have to kind of go through those and
Well,
see if
nice.
there's little niche things that I'm not maybe thinking about. So if we'd had this talk tomorrow, I could probably be a little bit more in depth than what I'm being right now. Now, the one point you made there though is really true. Like when you're being judged in one of these, it's really hard to know what to do. If well, I shouldn't say it's hard to know what to do if you're going to get really worked up about what the judges think, I think you're going to have a bit of a problem because I
Well,
think generally
uh-huh.
the idea is when you go into something like this, the idea is you've already kind of been selected because hopefully you already know what you're doing anyways. So you're there to represent your program. I'm not really there to change my program around to suit the event. I'm really going more to say, here's how I start Colts to the best of my ability and then hopefully that also does well. That as opposed to saying, here, I need to know this paragraph 6-3. Here's some little point you have to make. So I guess I'm coming at it
Mhm,
as just
mhm.
represent myself the best that I can and that. But um again, like what you said, different judges look at things differently. And to be quite honest, I mean, I'm sure they're going to have a talk with us ahead of time. I know they are. And kind of go over exactly what they want to see in that. But everybody's going to look at it slightly different. And I mean, I've watched cult startings myself, and the person that wins sometimes isn't the person that I thought would win, but the person that won, they maybe had a very good reason why they thought that was the person that should have
Yeah,
won. So it would be pretty tough to know what everybody's thinking. And that's again, just I think come at it from the point of view, it's like I would like to come in and say, I want to get this cult going as good as I possibly can. I want to set him up to do a good job for the rest of his life. And I think they've selected judges that that's what they're going to be looking for. They're going to be coming at looking at from the point of view is like this is in a short frame of time, but we're looking at it from the long term point of view on this horse and that. And if everybody's kind of on that page, I think it's going to be kind of a win-win.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a great perspective to have. I've up until this point, I haven't done any cold starting competitions, but the people that I've talked to that have done it, um, they all say a similar thing. The recipe for success is being aware of your constraints, but not compromising what you would normally do because of those
Hmm.
constraints, right? So it might be, oh, maybe we should quit him here where we got 3 minutes left on the timer instead
Hmm.
of starting something that takes 6 minutes to get done,
Hmm.
right? Or, oh, I should mention something here because it's what I'm being judged on is how I'm explaining things or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
But um, but yeah, really like how you worded that. You're going to go there to represent your program. This is how I do it, and if if it works out, it works out. If not, you were still on an international stage representing yourself and your program. So
Hmm.
that's awesome.
Hmm. Yeah, I think like I'm very much looking forward to it. I mean, it's a really great event and I've wanted to do it for quite a while now. So it's it's pretty darn cool. It's a really neat opportunity and that. So now don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna go in and sit in the corner and let the clock run out either. I'm gonna be trying to get the horse
Oh
trained
yeah,
up and do as good as we can. So I'm definitely treating it seriously and that.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, I mean, it is a it is about setting that colt up for success. And I think the competitors are coming in from that point of view. I mean, I don't know all of them, but I'm certain that's the type of folks they're picking. And I know the event, they've already kind of said ahead of time that's the ultimate goal. And then something else too is the crowds at cold startings, they're kind of a neat bunch as a rule because they're really coming in on the horse's side. They don't really care all that much, in my experience, who wins. They just want to see the horse do really well. So if
mm,
somebody came in and they pushed their horse too hard, but it looked like they checked a few more things off the list, as a general rule, I don't think that impresses people that are sitting there watching that, because the people that go to these things are generally people that already have a pretty good idea about horsemanship, and they're on the horse's team. They're not, I mean, they might have a particular trainer that they're rooting for, but they're all coming at it from the point of view of we want to see that horse um, be his best. And that, so it's like really, you're in a big building with a whole bunch of people that are all rooting for the exact same thing. So I think they're quite a positive experience. I think sometimes when folks, um, if they've never been to one, I think sometimes they think, oh, it's just about ramming through and getting a whole bunch of things checked off. And I don't really feel that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought of it through that lens, but yeah, some of the people, just the road to the horse or other colt startings that I've seen, some of the most memorable people or performances there have not been from the people that win. So that's a really good point.
No. And
Yeah.
it's different too, because I really don't know of any other type of event where it's a competition, but you're watching the training. So, like, for instance, if you go to a jumping horse show, you're there to watch the finished product. You're not really there to watch training. And the same thing, like, and I'm not picking
Mhm.
on any event, like, could be raining, could be cutting, could be pleasure, whatever. The training was done somewhere else. You're watching the finished performance. A cold starting is different because you're actually watching how did you get from point A to point B. So people are kind of getting an opportunity. I shouldn't say kind of, I think they're getting a real opportunity to see some of these things because you genuinely get to see what a person's going to do when they did such and such and it didn't work. It's like they had to have a plan B or a plan C, or they had to come at it from a different angle or something like that. So it's like from a spectator point of view, I think these things are very, very um they're really a learning opportunity if you come at it and look at it that way. And that because it's like you could be the most famous horse trainer in the world, but the colt that walks in the pen that day doesn't know that. And they're only going to respond
Yeah.
to what you present to them. And so it's just something I think people that go, if they go in with an open mind and say, hey, I'm going to learn from this, I think you'd have to be sitting there with your eyes closed not to take away something. Like, would maybe the way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's honestly a conversation we've had on this podcast before, is if you think about it, like you could, in my opinion, you could make an argument to be like anti cult starting competition,
Mm,
right? Because you're like, well, that's unfair to come in there and make those horses uh, do this at a certain time. But then if you're going to do that, you could kind of extrapolate that to one, definitely any aged event, right? Like any futurity or 4-year-old class or whatever you want to talk about. And then you could also really extrapolate that to like any sort of horse showing in general.
mhm,
And I mean, personally, I am not anti horse showing.
mhm,
I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their horses if they're being fair to the horse.
mhm,
Um, and so what's cool though is just what you alluded to. Like, it's such an opportunity for people to come together and learn and see all these different takes on basically people trying to get to the same place, right? But because of their background and experience and what they've learned, they're all trying to get to the place in different ways.
mhm,
And you know, it's kind of unscripted and you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes.
mhm,
But that to me kind of makes these things like a net positive for the industry, because you're exposing people to what, you know, maybe they haven't, that like there's people who maybe haven't even been exposed to horsemanship in general, right? Like or colt starting in the capacity that road to the horse presents it as, right? If you're coming like from the English world or something like that. But then you see that and you're like, wow, that's like a completely different way to approach this, and it sparks that, and then you know the human's better off for it. So I think generally speaking they're a net positive, and I think they'll continue to be that way if they have people like you participating, coming at it with the attitude of I'm gonna go there and demonstrate my program, what's worked for me, and I'm going to try to the best of my ability to set the horse up for success and explain what I'm doing to do that.
Yeah, I think that I think that's a very good way to put it. It's a net positive. Now, again, usually with something like this, the people in there have started a lot of colts. That's kind of why they're there.
Mhm.
So like there is a selection deal. But if you just said we're going to have 100 colt starting events next year and every random person that ever started one can enter them, then I think that's going to be a little bit different. That is where you're going to see some that
Sure.
are pushed beyond what they're capable of. And one thing I've
Mhm.
noticed a little bit, not so much from competitors, but just from talking to maybe people that have watched something like this, somebody that's maybe started one or two and it went really smooth, they kind of think this is just what you it's just all that easy. You're just going to go in and just do the
Mhm.
exact same thing again, and that's not really the way it is. Now, I'm jumping back here quite a bit, but this maybe is important. Like when I started starting colts for the public, it was kind of during the earlier phases of the natural horsemanship movement. And one thing that I was running into a lot was people would go watch a clinic or they would go watch a DVD on starting young horses. And to somebody that had no background in it, it just looked like you chased the horse around the round pen a few times, threw the saddle on, jumped on, and rode off into the sunset. And I always kind of point out that people were looking at it as if this was just kind of your everyday horse person and standing in the ring. And if they were watching it go that smooth, chances are they were watching somebody that started hundreds or maybe even thousands of colts in that manner, and they weren't getting a chance to see all. I mean, they were getting a chance, but there's just no way somebody can explain every little minor point that's happening
Mhm.
along the way. So just from an outsider looking in, they chase the horse around, get on the horse, and he rides off. That's all there is to it. So what I was
Mhm.
running into, I was starting these horses, and a great big percentage of the horses coming in to be started were really nervous and really touchy. And a lot of times people wouldn't tell me why, but I knew what it was. They had tried to copy this once or twice, got thrown off once or twice, and then thought, this isn't for me. And then they would send the colt out. But a lot of times they wouldn't tell you this had happened. You could figure it out pretty easy. It was pretty easy to see the warning signs. But they would kind of
Yeah.
let on like this horse was untouched and you knew full well it had been touched and things had gone wrong. So, anyways, I was starting a lot of horses that had had a couple bad sessions and they were nervous and they were touchy. And honestly, it was justified. Like, I could not hold it against those horses at all. They had every right to be nervous. And it was always frustrating to me because I thought if you'd never done anything, I'd be way ahead of if you had done this. And
Yeah.
so, although watching these things, I guess my point being, watching this stuff is important to somebody that's listening to this and thinking about being a spectator. I think you do have to have the understanding that you are watching folks that I think for the most part have done this a lot and that you're not going to catch everything. So you're looking
Mm.
at it. This is
Mhm.
almost the Colt starters version of a polished performance to a degree, but this is
Mhm.
something they probably refined down a lot over a long length of time. And I think you have to come at it from that angle as well.
Yeah. That's a really good point to make because, um, yeah, you don't wanna give people just enough rope they can hang themselves, right?
Yeah.
In anything you do. But
It's
that
really
that
yeah, it's really tricky with the horse train like, with the clinics, whether it be colt starting or something else, there is always this fine line because you definitely need to present the information, but it's really easy to give the impression that something's easier than what it is, and, so
Mhm.
it's very har there's kind of a tightrope there that everybody has to walk, and it's very easy to be a little too much one way or another. Like, you don't wanna not present the information, but you don't also wanna just have people walking away thinking they're just gonna go home and it's all gonna be as easy as what they saw maybe the next day with their horse.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrase I tell people a lot is most things with horses are simple, not easy. And there's a big
Yeah.
difference
Yes, yes, yeah.
because explaining a concept of horse behavior, uh, it doesn't take a PhD, right?
No.
Like you can articulate it, but it takes years and years and years of really working on your craft before you can have the ability to apply all that.
I think that's very true because going around the country doing clinics, a lot of times a person can tell me the theory behind what they're doing, but there's the theory and then there's actually doing it. There's
Yeah.
there's the overall
Yeah.
philosophy, and you could read a book and walk away with a whole bunch of philosophy, like, and have no horse experience. Like a person that's never handled a horse could give you horse starting or horse training philosophy, and it would technically be
Mhm.
correct. That same person isn't going to be able to train a horse, and that at least not yet. And so it's just something that there's the theory of it, but the practical part is, I mean, I think you need the overall goals, and I think you need the overall theory of horsemanship, but theory itself is just, it's only a piece of it. It's not the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I make the joke, there's a lot of horse academics out there and there's not a lot of horse practitioners.
I haven't heard it worded quite that way, but that's a very good point. Yes, I think that's very, very true.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool, man. Well, hey, this has been a fun conversation. I'm glad I was able to sit down and actually get to chat with you. Like I said, heard about you, heard good things about you, but now I know a little bit more, and I'll when we're sitting down in March and watching Road to the Horse, I'll be excited to see how you do.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. So before we wrap up, just for anyone listening, if they want to find out more about you and your program and all the things you got going on, uh, where should they find you? Your social medias, your website, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Well, the website for the training business is pretty simple, thehorsetrainers.com. And then on Facebook, it's just Jason and Bronwyn Irwin Horsemanship. And then also the farm is North Star Livestock Quarter Horses. And our website is just North Star Livestock. And we have a Facebook for North Star Livestock as well. And then I forget what our TikTok and Instagram and all those other ones. I can't remember the exact thing. But if you just punch in Jason and Brown or one horsemanship or something pretty close, it'll probably pop up.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. For everyone listening, don't forget to follow the show on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.